Exodus 36. Therefore, Bezalel, and Aholiab, and every wise man, to whom the Lord gave wisdom and intelligence, so as to know how to work skillfully, made that which was necessary for the uses of the sanctuary and which the Lord had instructed. And when Moses had called them and every man of learning, to whom the Lord had given wisdom, and who, of their own accord, had offered themselves in order to accomplish this work, he handed over to them all the donations of the sons of Israel. And while they were pursuing this work, the people offered what they had vowed each day, in the morning. The artisans were compelled by this to go to Moses and to say, "The people offer more than is needed." Therefore, Moses ordered this to be recited, with a voice of proclamation, "Let neither man nor woman offer anything further for the work of the sanctuary." And so they ceased from offering gifts, because what was offered was sufficient and was more than in abundance. And all those who were wise of heart, in order to accomplish the work of the tabernacle, made 10 curtains of fine twisted linen, and hyacinth, and purple, and twice-dyed scarlet, with diverse workmanship by the art of embroidery. Each of these was 28 cubits in length, and in width, 4. All the curtains were of one measure. And he joined 5 curtains to one another, and the other 5 he coupled to one another. He also made loops of hyacinth along the edge of one curtain on both sides, and similarly along the edge of the other curtain, so that the loops might meet against one another and might be joined together. For these, he also cast 50 gold rings, which would retain the loops of the curtains and so make the tabernacle one. He also made 11 canopies from the hair of goats, in order to cover the roof of the tabernacle. One canopy held in length 30 cubits, and in width 4 cubits. All the canopies were of one measure. 5 of these he joined by themselves, and the other 6 separately. And he made 50 loops along the edge of one canopy, and 50 along the edge of the other canopy, so that they might be joined to one another. And 50 buckles of brass, with which the roof might be woven together, so that from all the canopies there would be made one covering. He also made a covering for the tabernacle from the skins of rams, dyed red, and another cover above it, from violet skins. He also made the standing panels of the tabernacle, from setim wood. 10 cubits was the length of one panel, and 1 1/2 cubits comprised the width. There were 2 dovetails along every panel, so that one might be joined to the other. Thus did he make all the panels of the tabernacle. Of these, 20 were toward the meridian area, opposite the south, with 40 bases of silver. 2 bases were set under one panel at each of 2 sides at the corners, where the joints of the sides terminate in corners. Likewise, at that side of the tabernacle which looks toward the north, he made 20 panels, with 40 bases of silver, 2 bases for each board. Yet truly, opposite the west, that is, toward that part of the tabernacle which looks out toward the sea, he made 6 panels, and 2 others at each corner of the tabernacle at the back, which were joined from bottom to top and held together by one joint. So did he make both corners on that side. So then, there were altogether 8 panels, and they had 16 bases of silver, with, of course, 2 bases under each panel. He also made bars from setim wood, 5 to hold together the panels at one side of the tabernacle, and 5 others to fit together the panels of the other side, and, in addition to these, 5 other bars toward the western area of the tabernacle, opposite the sea. He also made another bar, which came through the middle of the panels from corner to corner. But the panels themselves he overlaid with gold, casting silver bases for them. And he made the rings from gold, through which the bars might be able to be drawn. And he covered the bars themselves with layers of gold. He also made a veil from hyacinth, and purple, from vermilion as well as fine twisted linen, with varied and distinctive embroidery. And 4 columns of setim wood, which, along with their heads, he overlaid with gold, casting silver bases for them. He also made a tent at the entrance of the tabernacle from hyacinth, purple, vermilion, and fine twisted linen, wrought with embroidery. And 5 columns with their heads, which he covered with gold, and he cast their bases from brass. Exodus 37. Now Bezalel also made the ark from sedim wood, having 2 1/2 cubits in length, and 1 1/2 cubits in width, and the height was also 1 1/2 cubits. And he clothed it with the purest gold, inside and out. And for it he made a crown of gold all around, casting 4 gold rings at its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side, and 2 on the other. Likewise, he made bars from sedim wood, which he clothed with gold. And he placed them into the rings, which were at the sides of the ark, to carry it. He also made the propitiatory, that is, the oracle, from the finest gold, 2 1/2 cubits in length, and 1 1/2 cubits in width. And then 2 cherubim of ductile gold, which he positioned at the 2 sides of the propitiatory. 1 cherub at the top of one side, and the other cherub at the top of the other side. The 2 cherubim were at each end of the propitiatory, spreading their wings, and protecting the propitiatory, and gazing toward it and toward one another. He also made the table from sedim wood, with a length of 2 cubits, and a width of 1 cubit, which had a height of 1 1/2 cubits. And he surrounded it with the finest gold, and for it he made a ledge of gold all around. And for the ledge itself he made a polished crown of gold, 4 fingers high, and upon the same, another crown of gold. And he cast 4 gold rings, which he set at the 4 corners at each foot of the table, opposite the crown. And he placed the bars into them, so that the table could be carried. Likewise, the bars themselves he made from sedim wood, and he surrounded them with gold. And he made vessels for the diverse uses of the table, as well as the little cups, and bowls, and measuring cups, and the censers, from pure gold, in which the libations would be offered. He also made the lampstand, formed from the finest gold. The branches, bowls, and little spheres, as well as the lilies, proceeded from its bar. 6 on the 2 sides, 3 branches on one side, and 3 on the other. 3 bowls, the size of a nut, were on each branch, with little spheres and lilies, and 3 bowls, in the likeness of a nut, were on the other branch, with the little spheres together with the lilies. The workmanship of the 6 branches, which proceeded from the shaft of the lampstand, was equal. Now on the shaft itself were 4 bowls, the size of a nut, and little spheres together with each one, and lilies. And little spheres under 2 branches in 3 places, which together made 6 branches proceeding from one bar. Thus, both the little spheres and the branches were from the same thing, all hand-worked from the purest gold. He also made the 7 lamps with their candle snuffers, and the vessels where the candles would be extinguished, from the finest gold. The lampstand with all its vessels weighed a talent of gold. He also made the altar of incense from sedim wood, having 1 cubit on each of 4 sides, and in height, 2. From its corners proceeded horns. And he clothed it with the purest gold, with its grating, as well as the sides and the horns. And for it he made a crown of gold all around, and 2 gold rings under the crown at each side, so that the bars might be put into them, and the altar could be carried. Now the bars themselves he also made from sedim wood, and he covered them with layers of gold. He also composed the oil for the ointment of sanctification, and the incense, from the purest aromatics, with the skill of a perfumer. Exodus 38. He also made the altar of holocaust from sedim wood, 5 cubits square, and 3 in height, the horns of which proceeded from the corners. And he covered it with layers of brass. And for its uses, he prepared diverse vessels out of brass, kettles, forceps, little hooks, larger hooks, and receptacles for the fire. And he made its grating of brass, in the manner of a net, and under it, in the midst of the altar, its base. Casting 4 rings at the 4 ends of the net in order to set the bars, so as to carry it. These bars he also made of sedim wood, and he covered them with layers of brass. And he drew them through the rings, which projected from the sides of the altar. But the altar itself was not solid, but hollow, made from panels and empty inside. He also made a wash tub of brass, with its base made from the mirrors of the women who kept watch at the door of the tabernacle. He also made the atrium, at the south side of which were hangings of fine twisted linen of 100 cubits and 20 columns of brass with their bases. The heads of the columns and all of the engraving work were of silver. Equally, at the northern area, the hangings, the columns, and the bases and heads of the columns were of the same measure and work in metal. Yet truly, on that side which looks out toward the west, there were hangings of 50 cubits, and 10 columns with their bases of brass. And the heads of the columns and all of the engraving work were of silver. Furthermore, toward the east, he prepared hangings of 50 cubits, of which there were 15 cubits, among 3 columns with their bases, holding up one side. And on the other side, there were equally hangings of 15 cubits, and 3 pillars, and the same number of bases. All the hangings of the atrium were woven from fine twisted linen. The bases of the columns were of brass, but their heads with all of their engravings were of silver. Now he also overlaid the columns of the atrium themselves with silver. And he made, at its entrance, a hanging, wrought with embroidery, of hyacinth, purple, vermilion, and fine twisted linen, which held 20 cubits in length, yet truly it was 5 cubits in height, as with the measure of all the hangings of the atrium. Now the columns of the entrance were 4, with bases of brass, and their heads and engravings were of silver. Likewise, the tent pegs of the tabernacle and the atrium all around he made of brass. These are the instruments of the tabernacle of the testimony, which were enumerated according to the instruction of Moses, with the ceremonies of the Levites, by the hand of Ithamar, the son of Aaron the priest. Which Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur from the tribe of Judah, had completed, just as the Lord decreed through Moses. He was joined by his associate, Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, from the tribe of Dan, who himself was also an exceptional artisan of wood, and of weaving, as well as of embroidery, with hyacinth, purple, vermilion, and fine linen. All of the gold that was expended in the work of the sanctuary, and that was offered in donation, was 29 talents and 730 shekels, according to the measure of the sanctuary. Now it was offered by those who were past the numbering of 20 years and above, from 603,550 men able to bear arms. There were, beyond that, 100 talents of silver, from which were cast the bases for the sanctuary and for the entrance where the veil hangs. 100 bases were made from 100 talents, a single talent being counted for each base. But from 1,775, he made the heads of the columns, which he also clothed with silver. Likewise, of brass, there was offered 72,000 talents, and 400 more shekels, from which were cast the bases at the entrance of the tabernacle of the testimony, and the altar of brass with its grating, and the vessels which pertain to its use. And the bases of the atrium, as much at the circumference as at its entrance, and the tent pegs of the tabernacle and of the atrium all round. Exodus 39. Truly, from hyacinth and purple, vermilion and fine linen, he made the vestments with which Aaron was clothed when he ministered in the holy places, just as the Lord instructed Moses. And so he made an ephod of gold, hyacinth, and purple, and twice dyed scarlet, and fine twisted linen, wrought with embroidery. And he cut thin strips of gold and drew them into threads, so that they could be twisted into the weave of the first colors. And he made 2 edges, coupled to one another at the top of both sides, and a white belt from the same colors, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. He also prepared 2 onyx stones, set and enclosed in gold, and engraved with the skill of a jeweler, with the names of the sons of Israel. And he set them in the sides of the ephod, as a memorial to the sons of Israel, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. He also made a breastplate, wrought with embroidery, according to the work of the ephod, from gold, hyacinth, purple, and twice-dyed scarlet, and fine twisted linen, with 4 equal sides, doubled, of the measure of the palm of a hand. And he set 4 rows of gems in it. In the first row was a sardius stone, a topaz, an emerald. In the second was a garnet, a sapphire, and a jasper. In the third was a zircon, an agate, and an amethyst. In the fourth was a chrysolite, an onyx, and a beryl, surrounded and enclosed in gold by their rows. And these 12 stones were engraved with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, each one with a single name. They also made, in the breastplate, little chains linked to one another, from the purest gold, and 2 hooks, and the same number of gold rings. Moreover, they set the rings at both sides of the breastplate, from which 2 golden chains would hang, which they connected with the hooks that projected from the corners of the ephod. These were both in front and in back so that they met one another, and so that the ephod and the breastplate were woven together, being fastened to the wide belt and strongly coupled with rings, to which a hyacinth band was joined, lest they should shake loose and be moved away from one another, just as the Lord instructed Moses. They also made the tunic of the ephod entirely from hyacinth, with the head in the upper part at the middle, and a woven edge all around the head. Then, at the feet below, they also made pomegranates from hyacinth, purple, vermilion, and fine twisted linen, and little bells from the purest gold, which they set between the pomegranates at the very bottom of the tunic all around. So then, the high priest approached, adorned with gold bell and pomegranate, when he performed his ministry, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. They also made fine linen tunics with woven work, for Aaron and his sons, and headdresses with their little crowns of fine linen, and also linen undergarments of fine linen. Truly, they also made a wide band of fine twisted linen, hyacinth, purple, as well as vermilion, twice dyed, with skillful embroidery, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. They also made the plate of sacred veneration from the purest gold, and they wrote on it, with the skill of a jeweler, "Holy to the Lord." And they fastened it to the headdress with a hyacinth band, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. And so all the work of the tabernacle and of the covering of the testimony was completed. And the sons of Israel did all that the Lord had instructed Moses. And they offered the tabernacle, and the covering, and all of the articles, the rings, the panels, the bars, the columns and bases, the cover of the skins of rams, dyed red, and the other cover of violet skins, the veil, the ark, the bars, the propitiatory, the table, with its vessels and the bread of the presence, the lampstand, the lamps, and their utensils with the oil, the altar of gold, and the ointment, and the incense of aromatics, and the tent at the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar of brass, the grating, the bars, and all of its vessels, the washtub with its base, the hangings of the atrium, and the columns with their bases, the hanging at the entrance of the atrium, and their little cords and pegs. Nothing was lacking of the articles that were commanded to be made for the ministry of the tabernacle and for the covering of the covenant. Likewise, the vestments, which the priests, namely, Aaron and his sons, make use in the sanctuary, the sons of Israel offered, just as the Lord had instructed. After this, when Moses saw that everything was completed, he blessed them. Exodus 40. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, In the first month, on the first day of the month, you shall raise the tabernacle of the testimony. And you shall place the ark in it, and you shall release the veil before it. And having brought in the table, you shall place the things which were solemnly commanded upon it. The lampstand shall stand with its lamps. And the altar of gold, in which the incense is burned, shall stand before the ark of the testimony. You shall place the tent at the entrance of the tabernacle. And before it, the altar of holocaust. The washtub shall stand between the altar and the tabernacle, and you shall fill it with water. And you shall encompass the atrium and its entrance with hangings. And, having taken up the oil of unction, you shall anoint the tabernacle along with its articles, so that they may be sanctified. The altar of holocaust and all its vessels. The washtub with its base, and all things, you shall consecrate with the oil of unction, so that they may be the Holy of Holies. And you shall bring forward Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tabernacle of the testimony, and, having washed them with water, you shall clothe them in the holy vestments, so that they may minister to me, and so that their unction may accomplish an everlasting priesthood. And Moses did all that the Lord had instructed. Therefore, in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, the tabernacle was put in place. And Moses raised it up, and he positioned the panels as well as the bases and the bars, and he set up the columns. And he stretched out the roof over the tabernacle, imposing a cover above it, just as the Lord had decreed. And he placed the testimony in the ark, applying the bars beneath, and the oracle above. And when he had brought the ark into the tabernacle, he drew the veil before it, in order to fulfill the commandment of the Lord. And he placed the table in the tabernacle of the testimony, at the north side, beyond the veil, arranging before it the bread of the presence, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. And he placed the lampstand in the tabernacle of the testimony, away from the table, on the south side, setting the lamps in order, according to the precept of the Lord. He also positioned the altar of gold under the roof of the testimony, opposite the veil. And he heaped upon it the incense of aromatics, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he positioned the tent at the entrance of the tabernacle of the testimony, and the altar of holocaust in the vestibule of the testimony, offering the holocaust and the sacrifices upon it, just as the Lord had decreed. Likewise, he stationed the washtub between the tabernacle of the testimony and the altar, filling it with water. And Moses and Aaron, along with his sons, washed their hands and feet whenever they would enter the covering of the covenant, and when they approached to the altar, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. And he raised up the atrium around the tabernacle and the altar, drawing the hanging at its entrance. After all these things were perfected, the cloud covered the tabernacle of the testimony, and the glory of the Lord filled it. Neither could Moses enter the covering of the covenant, the cloud was covering all things, and the majesty of the Lord was flashing. For the cloud had covered everything. Whenever the cloud departed from the tabernacle, the sons of Israel set out by their companies. But if it remained hanging over it, they remained in the same place. Certainly, the cloud of the Lord lay over the tabernacle by day, and the fire by night, being seen by all the people of Israel throughout all their resting places. Thank you for watching. If you like the content on this channel, please press subscribe, the like button or comment below. We'd love to get your tips. See you next time.